Chapter 6 of Environmental Science, the science behind the stories. This particular chapter is about species interactions, community ecology. The case study in this chapter is about zebra mussels, which are important species in environmental science. Important because they're actually not good, but they're important because they are a great example of an invasive species. So this particular case study has a lot of information that you need to know. Zebra mussels are native to Western Asia, Eastern Europe, and they came to America into the Great Lakes. There is a connection to the ocean with one of the Great Lakes, one or more, and these mussels had attached themselves to the ships that came from Western Asia or Eastern Europe. Also, inside of ships, there's something called ballast water, and the larvae of the mussels can be in that water, and the ballast is for balance. And so this particular mussel has spread quickly all over the United States because, let's say you have a water ski boat, and you go and water ski in a particular lake that has zebra mussels, and you leave some of the water inside your boat, and that water may have larvae. And then you take the boat on land on a trailer and you go to a different lake, and you have now spread the larvae to the next lake. So there's a lot of regulations now when you have a boat, and they even do this at Castaic Lake for zebra mussels. They will inspect your boat and check and make sure you emptied your ballast water from the last lake you were at, and they check for any mussels that have clung to your boat because they can survive for a while being out of the water. So what are the problems with zebra mussels? Well, you can see here at the top of page 150, they clog pipes, intake pipes for water treatment or water. The cities around the Great Lakes, like Chicago, they suck in water from the lake and they treat it, and it's their drinking water. So they can clog the pipes. So no natural predators in the Great Lakes. They clog water intake pipes. They foul fishing gear, sink buoys. They cost a lot of money a year. And they deplete the phytoplankton. They eat too much of it. And they can also suffocate. You can see here the native mussels. On page 151, we go into talking about some species interactions. First, we have competition. And there's two different kinds. You have intraspecific within a species, interspecific with other species. So if you are the same species competing for a resource, it's intraspecific. If you are two different species competing for food, shelter, etc., you're interspecific. And then sometimes you have one species that completely excludes the other from the resource entirely, and that is competitive exclusion. So we can introduce the concept of niche here. If we have three species here, now species 1 can occupy all of this area, not just to live, but niche also refers to food sources, places to live, water supply, nutrients, etc. But because of competition, species 1 does not occupy everything it can in terms of food, land, etc., because species 2 and species 3 are in competition with it. So we call this dotted line the fundamental niche, and this actual yellow space the realized niche. So species do coexist, live side by side to minimize competition. And they do this because species do not really want to directly compete. It takes a lot of energy to fight and compete. And so if they can divide up the resources, it's much better. When you go on to page 152, you can see another example of this. This is resource partitioning. And again, species will eat different kinds of bugs, live in different parts of the tree so that everybody can eat. And avoiding direct competition is nice because then you don't have to spend your energy fighting. You can spend your energy eating food, surviving, finding water, making offspring. All right, on the next page we have examples of predation. The difference between predation and parasitism is that predation, well, first of all, both of them hurt a species and benefits another. But the difference with predation is that a predator hunts, captures, and immediately kills the prey. Whereas a parasite is when one species harms another but doesn't kill them immediately. So they use the body as a host to capture nutrients or a place to live. An example would be a tapeworm in our bodies. A tapeworm would live in your stomach and your intestines and absorb the food that you eat. So that harms you because you're not getting the food nutrients, but it doesn't kill you immediately. Predator and prey cycle together. We did an activity with this in class. So we show that one follows the other. When prey goes up, predators go up, and they follow each other. So they cycle together. On the next page, we have some adaptations to avoid predators. Make sure you know these and can be able to write about these for a free response question. This is page 154. So cryptic coloration, warning coloration, and mimicry. Make sure you can describe all of three of those. A couple of other terms on page 154. A parasitoid is an insect parasite that feeds on another insect. Wasps are a good example. We actually use wasps in agriculture to eat bad insects that would eat our crops, and so we release wasps. Now, most of these wasps are non-stinging, so they don't actually hurt humans, but they will go and kill other harmful insects. And the word herbivory is basically when an animal eats a plant. It's called herbivory. And plants have defense against being eaten, thorns. Some of them are poisonous. Some of them want ants to crawl all over because ants taste bad. And so if you encourage ants on your plant body, then predators don't want to eat you as a plant. Make sure you know the definition of coevolution. Make sure you know the definition of an evolutionary arms race, where one species develops new good traits, so its predator or prey must also change and become better and stronger and faster. And then the types of symbiosis. So you learn this in biology. This is a review. Parasitism is a type of symbiosis that we sticky noted before. Mutualism, when both species benefit, like bees and flowers. Microbes in your gut. So in your stomach and intestine, you have good bacteria that help digest your food. So you are benefited and the microbes get food, so they are benefited also. This example here is coral, is mutualism, a mutualistic relationship with an algae, and this particular algae is called zooxanthellae, and yes, you have to know zooxanthellae. Coral provide a home for the algae, and algae photosynthesize and provide energy for the coral, so they both benefit. Without the zooxanthellae, which is the name of the algae, the coral will die. And when the zooxanthellae leave, the algae themselves provide color for the coral, and so when the zooxanthellae leave, the coral loses its color, and we call it coral bleaching. We'll study that more in chapter 16. Turning the page to 156, we have two other types of symbiosis. We have amensalism, where one species is harmed and the other is unaffected. This one is not very common, and it's hard to even find examples, but do make sure you know the definition. And then commensalism is when one species benefits and the other is unaffected. For example, on Finding Nemo, you have the clownfish that lives in the sea anemone. The clownfish gets a home and protection. The sea anemone has nothing good or nothing bad. And another term to know is allelopathy. And some plants release poisonous chemicals in their leaves or in their body tissues, and they want to harm nearby plants to make sure that there's no competition for water, for rainwater, for nutrients in the soil. For example, apricot trees, their leaves are very acidic and they also contain chemicals. So when those leaves fall to the ground and get decomposed and mixed with the soil, other plants can't live below those trees. Oak trees are also the same way, and it prevents other trees from germinating under that tree or near that tree or even other plants, and make sure to prevent competition for resources. Going on to page 157, here we talk about trophic levels, which is a feeding rank or hierarchy. And under the sticky note you have an example of a food web. You drew a big one in class, so you should be able to understand the trophic levels pretty well after doing that activity. Make sure you know the difference between a detritivore and a decomposer. A decomposer is anything that breaks down dead things back into nutrients. An animal that does this is called a detritivore. Worms, ants, maggots. Another name is called a detritus feeder, because the word detritus means dead organisms. The straight up decomposers are microorganisms such as bacteria, mold, fungus, and then the detritivores are animals that decompose. Make sure you understand the difference between the two. Here's a word that's not in your book, but it is on your test, saprophytism, and that is getting food from dead, decaying organic matter. So detritivores practice saprophytism. We actually refer to saprophytism when we talk about fungus a lot. So you will often see that word when you refer to fungus and mold, decomposing dead things. On page 159, we have a picture here of a food web, and we took some notes on food webs. So go ahead and see your binder or your notes for more information on a food web. You can also read the caption here. It gives you a lot of information regarding the food web. Page 160 talks about zebra mussels and their impacts on fish communities. It's a rather long article, and you do not need to know much detail about it. However, on the bottom, the book talks about keystone species. Now, they are very important species, and removing these species will destroy or greatly damage the ecosystem. You watched a video, or will watch a video, about wolves in Yellowstone. They're keystone species. Sea otters in a kelp forest are as well. And when we turn the page here on 162, we can see how the sea otter is a keystone species. When the sea otters are in the kelp forest, they eat sea urchins. And they keep the population of sea urchins in check. About 150 years ago, people hunted and killed the sea otters off the California coast. And so the sea otters, when they were gone, the sea urchin population boomed and basically destroyed the kelp forest, and that ecosystem was completely obliterated, went away completely without the sea otters. We're going to pause here and continue on the next page with the next video.